Hello and welcome to Zasaa Zooms In. In this episode, I had a conversation with one of my big sisters, Roz, and we spoke about something that none of us would ever have imagined that it would be something we would be speaking about from experience. But we spoke about cancer. Yes, the big C, cancer, that horrible, horrible thing. But not just cancer, cancer in a child. Rose's daughter, Rihanna, had cancer. And yeah, this is what she had to say about her experience. Rose, welcome to Zasaa Zooms In.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for coming to speak to me today.
You're
because
welcome.
I think it's a very important topic we're going to talk about. So you found out of the blue
Yes,
that one of your daughters had cancer.
exactly.
Can you just talk to me about that?
So it's my younger daughter who was 13 at the time, and she was actually diagnosed in May of 2019. And the way we found out was because all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, Rihanna started complaining about having stomach cramps, and over the course of maybe about 10 days, they seemed to get successively worse. But initially, my thought was, well, you're 13,
Yeah,
you're about to get your period, don't worry, this is so normal. And so I was giving her Tylenol, Pamprin, Midol, things like that, which would work for a time. And then it would wear off and she would, be in pain. And the pain got worse as the days went by. And right before, this was taking place right before a long weekend holiday, the Memorial Day holiday in the States. And so I told her, okay, on Friday, the Friday that you have off from school, we'll go and, go to the doctor, just get it checked out, what have you. And, but that Friday rolled around and she, had made plans with her friends because they had the day off of school. And that's the other thing that didn't really make me feel panicked. She kept doing all the normal things she was doing. Going to school. She didn't want to stay home from school. She was seeing her friends. She was doing all sorts of different things. Yeah. And so, so that Friday, she, decided, oh, I'm okay. I'm not going to go to the doctor today. I'm hanging out with my friends. I said, okay. So the next morning, which was a Saturday, I think, she actually woke me up very early in the morning, around 5, and told me that she had just been sick. So I got up, went to her room, I helped her get, cleaned up and everything, and I told her, look, okay, go back to sleep. When you wake up, we'll go to the doctor. But as it turned out, about an hour later, she got sick again. And so at that point, she was in terrible pain at this point, doubled over in pain. So I went and got my husband and said, look, something's wrong. We have to take her to the emergency room. So we managed to get her into my car, and she was in such terrible pain that every time I drove over a pothole or went over a bump in the road, she would literally cry out. Wow. So by the time we got her to the hospital, the on-call doctor decided to do a chest x-ray and basically an abdomen and chest x-ray to try and figure out what this pain was from. And they very quickly realized that her chest was full of fluid, and so much fluid that one of her lungs had collapsed. Wow. So they diagnosed her with pneumonia. They said she has pneumonia, and the chest fluid needs to be drained, but we can't do that here, so we're going to send you to a children's hospital, not too far away. So they took her there by ambulance. Got her settled at that hospital. They surgically inserted a chest tube. The fluid started draining. Everything was going well. She was feeling better. And then at a certain point, the doctor who was on call there came up to my husband and I and said, as the fluid is draining, it looks like she has a tumor. And it just didn't make sense. It just didn't, there's nothing that you.
So when he said it looks like she has a tumor, did you know that that was cancer, or did you just think it was a tumor? I mean, all
No, I
tumors
knew.
cancer. I don't know.
No, all tumors aren't cancer. It depends on whether they're benign or malignant. That's number one. You can have a tumor that is not cancerous. No, I didn't. I didn't know it was cancer, but I knew something wasn't right. Something didn't feel right. When he told us, so at the first hospital they diagnosed her with pneumonia.
Yeah.
And but I also realized that as pneumonia is not very serious. It's not, it's serious, but it's definitely treatable. But years ago, my older daughter had pneumonia, and something told me this doesn't look like pneumonia. There was no fever, no coughing, no nothing. But I just thought that seems weird, but I didn't question it. When we got to this new hospital, when the doctor at one point came up to me, and he was very happy, very pleased with the way the fluid was draining. He came up to me and he said, "When did her fever break?" And I said, "Oh, she never had a fever." And he said, "Oh, really?" And just the way he said that made me think something's wrong. Something isn't quite right. But when the fluid was draining, he did another chest x-ray. And with that chest x-ray, he came back to us and said, "I think I see a tumor." I didn't know whether it was cancer, because one of the things he said was, "I think it's a tumor. We need to biopsy the fluid to see if it's malignant or not." So I was so confused and so mentally just out there that I just knew I didn't like the word tumor. He told us that he had called his oncology doctors. I knew I didn't like that. I didn't like the sound of any of it. I didn't like the sound of any of it. And it just didn't seem real that we're talking about tumors and cancer and oncology in relationship to my child. It just didn't seem, it was just horrible. So the oncology team came up. They biopsied the fluid. So within a 3-day period, we went from initially thinking she had pneumonia to her being diagnosed with cancer to, on the 3rd day, they started chemo. Wow. So it was all very, very fast, very quick, and all of a sudden you're in this situation.
Did it seem like she had had the tumor for a long period of time? I mean, you said it was only 10 days from when she had
it was about 10 days to 2 weeks between her symptoms starting and being in this situation in the hospital. No, what they did tell us, what one of the doctors told us, because I asked him, "How long do you think that this has been, cooking, so to speak, or whatever?" And he said that it didn't appear to have been very long, maybe a couple of months. It seemed to be a fairly new cancer. But unfortunately, anytime you have a chest tumor, anytime you have a tumor in your chest, it's automatically listed as stage 4.
Okay.
So even though it was stage 4, it seemed to be a fairly new cancer.
Was Rihanna what sort of child was she before? Was she like
very active, and still now that she's back to normal, extremely active, very health conscious, she dances competitively, so she's very aware of her body and what she eats. I mean, she has her days where she'll eat complete junk, but she's always. I was really surprised because out of my husband, my other daughter Rihanna, and I, if we're going to snack or something, she's the one that will look for the yogurt or the fruit or the veggies or whatever. The rest of us are reaching for the chips. She's reaching for cucumbers and things like this. And she's also incredibly active. As I said, she dances competitively, so she exercises, she works out, she's very healthy. So it really stunned me. It really shocked me. She's the last one I was expecting to go through this. For anybody, but she would have been the last, So she stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. They started her chemo, and it was just a surreal experience. They started her on chemo. She stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks while they just made sure that the chemo started off well, and then they sent her home. And actually, it all seemed to be perfectly normal. In fact, I remember one time in the hospital, she was like on day 3 or 4 of chemo, and I remember saying to the doctor, she seems really good. She hasn't been sick at all. This seems to be going well. And he said, "Oh, she'll get much worse before she gets better." I mean, they don't sugarcoat anything. He was like, "She's going to get worse before she gets better." I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, he was right. But, she came home after 2 weeks, then continued chemo as an outpatient.
Yeah.
And for the first month, actually, she didn't get sick at all. Everything seemed to be normal. And then the sickness started. I guess chemo, there's an accumulation that takes place. Yeah. And then once she started getting sick, that was the future for the next year and a half or whatever. Wow. Yeah.
So how, obviously, as a mother, you just get on with it, you jump into it. What do you think? Okay, no, let me start with Kira. How did it affect Kira? Did it affect Kira?
I think it did.
Obviously it did. Stupid question, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, the main tangible effect was that summer, which would have been about 6 weeks to 2 months after Rihanna was diagnosed. Kira would have been on summer vacation from school, and she had signed up to be an intern at a local theater group. And she went for the first day, and at the end of the day I went and picked her up, and she was just very quiet and didn't seem very happy. So I said, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" And she just started crying. She said, "I just don't feel like I should be here. I feel like I should be at home with Rihanna. This isn't the time for me to, I just don't feel comfortable being out of the house." Because also, of course, everything was so new at that point that nobody knew what the next day would bring.
Yeah.
And she just didn't feel like it was good for her to be out of the house and away from the situation. She wanted to be there and be with Rihanna and be aware of what's going on as it's taking place. So we, immediately decided, no, she should be home. Yeah, there's definitely something, with siblings, they're very deeply affected by what happens with each other. Even if they're not saying it, even if it's not immediately apparent, we knew that she was being affected by it. She's quite protective over Rihanna.
What's the age difference?
Almost not even 2 years.
Oh,
it's like 21 months.
So,
yeah. We definitely realized that the best place for her was to be at home with her sister. And she really, Rihanna, if you know Rihanna is already quite a demanding person, but she had Kira running up the stairs several times a day, and but Kira was up for it. She was open to it.
So what about school? Obviously she was off school for...
Yeah, she was off of school she pretty much missed one school year in terms of going to school.
Yeah.
She was diagnosed just about 3 weeks before the end of the school year, and she was in the 8th grade. We live in the US, so she was 8th grade. So from about 3 weeks before the end of 8th grade until almost the end of 9th grade, she stayed home. She had a tutor who was supposed to come to the house every day, Monday through Friday, but because Rihanna was very rarely up for it, she would come maybe once a week. So she sat out of school for that year, and then of course was cleared to go back right before lockdown, about 2 weeks before the pandemic took over. But her school was amazing. They as soon as she was diagnosed, we let the school know, and they were incredibly supportive of Rihanna and of the whole family. And so they told us they actually worked with her tutor to make sure that those important things, those targeted important things that Rihanna needed to know, they told the tutor, just concentrate on these things. Don't worry about the rest. We'll figure that out when she comes back, which they indeed did. So even though she sat out for a year with sporadic tutoring here and there, when she rejoined her grade, she was able to rejoin exactly where they were.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so she didn't miss anything academic, really. And whatever she did miss, the school worked with her to fill in those blanks and fill those gaps and things like that. Socially, she missed quite a lot, obviously. She was able to see her friends periodically here and there, but I think that was probably the most difficult thing for her.
When we were speaking earlier, you spoke about her hair.
Yes. Rihanna's always been very proud of her hair. It's very long and thick, and so her one thing, I remember one night we were in her room, this was early on in her treatment, and she said, you know what, I can take anything, I can take this, I can do this, but the one thing I don't want to have happen is to lose my hair. So she was very, she got to a point, actually it's terrible because I remember there was one day in particular, she came downstairs and she braided her hair into two, and I looked at one of the braids was really thin, and I thought, oh my God. So I said to her, your hair, this one looks really thin. And it's difficult because you don't want to say anything, but you also don't want to ignore it because obviously she knows.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I know, my hair is getting really thin. So from that point on, she was very careful. Once a month, she would very gently brush her hair out, braid it, put it under a cap, and then wear a wig. Even when she had hair, she just wanted to protect it as best she could. And then one night, she caught the flu, so she had to be admitted into the hospital. And so it just so happened that this, while she was in the hospital, coincided with the time that she would have brushed her hair. So she said to me, Mom, tonight, can you brush out my hair? I said, okay, sure. So that evening, we took off the wig cap. She just had a wig cap and a headscarf. Took off the scarf, took off the wig cap. And she was sitting in bed, and I stood up and I went to brush her hair. And I could see that it was literally sitting on her scalp.
Wow.
And it was connected to her scalp by very few actual hairs. I just thought, oh my God. So I had to tell her, look, Rihanna, if I brush your hair, it's gonna come out. And I remember she said, am I gonna be bald? And I said, look, it's gonna come out. So she was very upset. She started crying, and she was really, really upset. But after a while, and actually that night we decided, look, just let's leave it. Let's just put the cap back on, put the scarf on. Let's deal with this in the morning. And she agreed to that. But then about half an hour later, she said, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Can you just cut it off? Just whatever is still attached to just get rid of it. So I went out to the nurse's station and borrowed a pair of scissors and came back in, and we just cut it all off, cut it down to nothing, obviously. And the only thing, she just didn't want to see it. Mm-hmm. So I had a plastic bag behind her, and as I cut it, I just put the hair in the bag. And then once she was upset, but once she grasped it, from there on, she was fine. In fact, when she came home from the hospital, I remember she got in the shower and she said it felt really good on her, her scalp. But she just,
it's a lot for a 13-year-old to deal with.
Exactly.
I mean, you say, because when you think about something like hair, I mean, they say the hair is the crown of a woman's
exactly,
head.
Exactly.
But for a 13-year-old,
yes,
it's like,
for a 13-year-old girl, it's devastating.
Yeah.
It's
devastating. For any woman, it could be quite devastating. So much more so for someone so young.
Exactly.
Gosh.
Exactly.
Okay, so question: what would you say you learned about yourself in this period? Did you learn anything?
I did. I think so. I definitely learned that I'm stronger than I thought. And I never really felt that I wasn't strong.
Yeah.
But definitely I realized that I can take things more in stride than I realized. That I can be handed really bad news and get through it.
Yeah.
And I also realized that even in horrible times, in adverse situations, there is good to be had. There are good things that can happen. I think my relationship with Rihanna became much stronger and was just on a different, just sort of went to a different level. Of course, now we're back to.
I was just going to say, as I stayed, well, at least you had your moments.
I felt it. At least I experienced it. Now we're back to the normal, teenage daughter and mother thing. But at the time, no. But it was, there was a lot of beauty within the adversity. Definitely, she and I got much closer during that period, and just able to. Some of the conversations I had with her were I would never have had with her if we hadn't been in this situation. It was. I learned quite a bit. As horrible as it was, I would never have wanted her to have gone through this at all. But the fact that she did, I don't regret it.
Yeah. And I think they say, isn't there the sort of quote that says it's through adversity that God grows you?
Yeah,
and,
definitely. Definitely.
And God, because we're Christians, we know that He never lets us go through what we can't
exactly.
handle. There's a reason for everything. We don't understand it, but we accept it.
Yes,
so I guess
definitely. Definitely. And I think she would say even that she learned so many things about herself, and also that, like she's obviously a young teenage girl. Sometimes there's drama with friends and things like that, and she's just like, I don't have time for that.
Yes,
I don't have time.
Dealt with bigger things.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't have time for that. So definitely had its silver linings, if you will.
Okay, and last question before I release you. How was Joe? Because obviously fathers and their daughters, I think.
Yes, exactly.
Quite hard.
Well, I think. First off, I think when, and whether this is a man thing or a Joe thing, I'm not sure, but I think Joe he took his lead from me. So if things were going well, then he was
fine.
He was fine. I think he was, I think also he had some fear because, it's tough for any parent to see their child go through this, but I think mothers have mothers have far more resilience, and they're far more able to cope with things like this. They're also able to better compartmentalize their emotions and feelings. Like, you might be sad or upset about something that's going on with your child, but you also realize you have to get through it. You have to deal with it. And I think women are much better at that. They're much more capable at things like that. And, I think he had his moments when he, was upset or...
Yeah.
It's funny because he would tend to focus, like when COVID hit. Actually, it was after COVID hit and the vaccines were starting to become available. He would fixate on, should she have a vaccine? Should she have a vaccine? I'm like, yeah, chill,
Yeah.
The doctor's already talked to, we've talked about it, we're set, they've told us, yes, she should have one, yes, she will have one. But he would fixate on things like that, you know. But Yeah, for sure. Let me put it this way: we're lucky that mothers are around.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree because but I always say this thing. I feel like God has given us capacity that
Definitely.
men just don't have, and
They
so sometimes
don't.
we can't blame them because they literally don't have.
They
it.
don't. They
I mean,
don't.
they don't use what they have, but
they
don't
just
have what
don't.
we have.
They don't.
So yeah, so it's
They don't.
yeah, so it's
They just don't.
But I wanted to say thank you very much for talking about it. I know that in our culture there seems to be a shame, a stigma about
Yeah.
talking about, especially these type of illnesses.
Yes,
Or any sort
exactly.
of, we kind of deny it, and
Right.
everything. So, and I think it's really important to talk about it because somebody out there might be going through
Exactly.
it and doesn't want to. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's not like you can even say, "Don't do this, don't do that."
Yeah, no,
But
you
at
can't.
least,
That's true. There's nothing that you can do or not do to stop getting cancer. I mean, obviously there are the certain, like don't smoke and all these other things. But by and large, there's really
certainly
nothing.
for children.
Certainly for
Yeah.
children, there's really nothing. It just happens. I've met and come across so many people, mothers whose kids have or had cancer, and even moms who've lost their kids. And there's just no rhyme or reason to it. Out of the blue, child feels some kind of symptom, they go to the doctor, they're diagnosed. It's terrible, they have cancer. I actually have a friend who, an adult friend, female friend, who was diagnosed, this has to be about 3 years ago. She had uterine cancer and didn't tell anybody. And I could never understand, why didn't you tell, why wouldn't you say it? It was kind of like, well, I'm not well. I carpooled with her to Rihanna's dance classes because her daughter also did dance. And it was just all of a sudden, she could no longer drive. So we had to rearrange, there were about 4 of us in the carpool, so we just knew that she was ill, we had to rearrange the carpooling thing. And it wasn't until months later that she actually said, oh, she had cancer. And we're like, well, why? There's nothing to be ashamed
I don't know why
of.
people, because I know a lot of people
who don't say it.
Yeah,
I mean,
some have actually died of it, and it's after they died of it
that you found out.
They had cancer for 3
Yeah,
years.
it's
And
like they didn't do anything to get it. It's not their fault.
I don't know why there's
So
such
I
a
don't
shame
understand
stigma.
that. There really shouldn't be, because there's so much. I mean, I actually, I don't mind sharing the story at all, because I feel like, yes, as you said, there might be people going through it, and whether they just need to know that somebody else has been there, or what they're feeling is normal, or the emotions that they're having are normal, or that others have felt those same emotions. I think it's
And
very
the other
important.
thing that we didn't mention, but I know for a fact, was you had a good support system, especially with your
I
family.
did. I had
And
a
think
very,
that's
very good
key
support
as well.
system.
One of our supporters is
No, but it's off camera. But I will say that when Rihanna, as luck would have it, actually, Chingwei, my younger sister, was actually at my house when this whole thing went down. And she was actually supposed to leave, I think, a few days before Rihanna was diagnosed, but she was also with her sons, and one of them had a passport issue, so she ended up having to delay her departure. Thank God. And then once Rihanna was diagnosed maybe 2 or 3 days later, and then once Rihanna was diagnosed, Chingwei delayed her departure even further.
Yeah.
And so she was with me through the whole hospital thing, the whole diagnosis, the whole beginning of chemo, the whole thing. Chingwei was there, and which was amazing and very important, very helpful to me, and extremely important, because also being my sister and another woman, she could relate to me in a way that possibly my husband couldn't.
Yes, yeah.
And then of course, once we had the diagnosis and everything was starting off, my mom came, our other sister came down, and throughout the entire treatment, Rihanna just finished treatment in October 2021, so last year. But throughout the entire time, yes, we had a really strong, very, very strong, healthy, helpful support system. So we were very lucky.
Yeah, I think that's really key in
Yeah.
a lot of things.
In fact, as soon as you're diagnosed with cancer, you're assigned a social worker.
Oh, right, okay.
And Rihanna's social worker kept trying to get me, we would see her when we'd go for chemo. Oh, how are you? And she kept saying, what can I do for you? How can I help you? And I was always like, we're fine. We're okay. We're good. And I think we were frustrating to her because she's like, there's nothing I
For
can
me to
do
do.
for you. What do you, isn't there something you need? I'm like, no, we're good, we're good. So we did have a really strong support system. We were very, very, very lucky.
Fantastic. Thank you so much,
Thank
Roz.
you,
Thank you.
Tina.
We're going to talk about something more exciting next time
Okay,
we come
all right.
on. But I think it was very important to talk about this. And
Thank you.
thanks to Chinwe for suggesting we did talk about it, because I do think, like you said, it's one of those things that people don't talk about, certainly in our community.
Exactly.
And so hopefully somebody will be, it will help someone.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. Thank you.
All right then, thanks.
Thank you.
Do you know what? I have to really commend Ross for actually coming out and speaking, because certainly in our culture, there is a stigma, there is a, I don't know, people, there's almost like a shame that is associated with certain things. I mean, like I said in the clip, that I know several people who have had cancer and who have refused to tell anybody about it. Some of them have gone on to die, some of them haven't. But it's like, I haven't had cancer, thank God, and so I cannot pretend to understand why they would do it. But it just seems to me like it's done more so in those type of diseases than with other diseases, and it's just really sad that when something so serious, something so major, that people find that they feel like they need to be alone in it. I don't know. I really don't know. But yeah, that's Rose's story, Rose and Rihanna's story. And thank God Rihanna is fine now. We really thank God. It was a trying time. Rose spoke about, how as a mother, you just get on with it. She didn't really have time to be scared because she just had to make sure that she was there for her daughter. And that's the reality for a lot of us mothers in whatever situation, but especially when it's a matter of life and death and health and stuff like that. And then she also spoke about her support system, which is so key. I mean, I say this all the time. We all need a good support system everywhere, in every, I mean, we're nothing without our support system. I firmly believe that. So who is your support system? What, do you have a support system? If you needed help, where would you go? That sort of thing. Actually, I think I'm going to I'll do a video on that. But yes, this was a really good chat. I mean, like I said, thank God Rihanna's okay. Obviously Rose and her family learned a lot about themselves, learned a lot through the experience, and sometimes life just happens and we just have to dig deep and fight back, just like Rose did with her family. Do share your thoughts with us. God bless you.